What is up, everybody? I'm back with you, and finally playing some Sailaway again. Kind of looking at my flagship here. A few new updates they've made. You can modify boats now. You can also, as you can see, download like stuff off of Google Images and put that on the side of the boat. The only problem is it shows up on the starboard side of the boat the right way, but on the port side it's backwards. So if you put a name on the side of the boat, it shows up backwards on the other side. Which we'll just have to deal with until they realize and the developers find out a way to invert it so that the image that you put on there inverts on the other side. And probably be quite a while before they do that, but it'll be nice. It's still very nice that we can modify boats finally, and as you can see, this is my flagship pretty much, Apache. I kind of designed it after Comanche, which is a 100-foot maxi racer from well, based out of Newport. It was based out of Newport. Now the Australians own it, and it races in the Sydney to Hobart all the time. But if we go look at one of my other boats here, just very quickly, Maverick is still one I'm working on. Where is it? There we go. Whoa, we're in the dark. Don't really want to be in the dark. Let's teleport. Get out of here. Alright, well anyway, this is going to be a beginner's video to not only Sailaway, but sailing in general for anybody who doesn't really understand sailing, wants to get into it. Yeah, this is my other boat, as you can see. So this name right here I took off of Google Images, and you can see it's backwards on the other side, so just a little bit frustrating. Pretty cool looking Code Zero. I got the same design on the Spinnaker, but it's the opposite. It'll be black and white instead of black and white this way. So that's pretty cool. Pretty cool looking boat. I guess this will be my backup. I'm still kind of using Apache for everything right now, but it's a pretty cool looking boat. I might use it in the near future. But for the sake of this video, let's go back to Apache. So I'm kind of down here in Sydney Hobart, or yeah, I just did the Sydney to Hobart race, but Sydney Harbor, and we're just kind of sitting here for right now. Anyway, yes, beginner's guide to sailing. I'm going to try and do that on this game, kind of show people who want to get introduced into sailing, sailboat racing, whatever you want to do. My recommendation is to get this game. It's about 40 bucks on Steam right now, and you can't go wrong because you can do absolutely everything. It's still kind of a alpha beta, whatever you want to call it. It's under development, and there's very few developers on this game, so you know, very slow. But things are getting done, and they're getting done pretty good. You know, the graphics are pretty damn good. They're working on the landscape still, so there's a lot of issues with the land in certain places, but you get the whole world. You know, you can sail around the world in this game. It's kind of ridiculous. Well, it's fucking awesome, to be honest with you. And we got all kinds of races going on. I'll probably, maybe at the end of this video, or the end of the next video, I'll show you guys. They just released the race editor, so you can make your own races now, and I essentially, over in the Lake Ontario area where I do sail in upstate New York on my own boat, I made the Scotch Bonnet race that I want to do one day. It's pretty cool because there's a whole online, I'll go over it in another video, but you can basically, you put the longitude and latitude in of the start buoys and the waypoints you want to go around, and it maps out a whole race course essentially, and you can invite other players to do it, and they can join in, and you set the date, you set the time, and you have a race against each other. We're doing the Volvo Ocean Race, as you've probably seen in my previous videos. Or, you know, up to 70 players or whatever it is, racing against each other at the same time. It's pretty cool. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into this because I know you want to do the same. Like I said, this is going to be the beginner's video. So I'm going to go over some basics of sailing, and probably episode 2. I'm trying to aim at like a half-hour long video for each one, but episode 2 is going to be more advanced sail trims, so you're talking about things like your Cunningham's, outhauls, backstays, all that stuff. I'm going to really go over. We're going to take the boat out into the ocean and really kind of see how everything's affected when I pull certain lines and whatnot, when I do certain things on purpose to either stall the sail or put more, you know, power into the sail, and show you kind of what happens when I do either or. Episode 3 is going to be all about racing, and that's all I have planned right now. I might do an episode 4 where it's a little bit something else. I haven't really thought about it yet, but yeah, episode 3 is going to be all about racing and racing tactics and yada yada yada. Um, but yeah, not too many boats to choose from in this game yet, but there is the 50-foot performance racer cruiser that I'm using right now, and then there is a mini transat, so you know, racing across the oceans and that. Someone's got a cool. Oh, okay. Anyway, so the basic parts of a boat for you, those of you that are really new. The front of the boat is called a bow. The back of the boat is called a stern. I like to call it the ass, but yeah, we're trying to make things PG here. The right side is the starboard side of the boat. Left side is the port side of the boat. Do not go on a boat and say left and right. It really pisses people off. Know your starboard and your port. Obviously, with the rigging on a boat, you have your mast, which is gigantic on this boat. This is a fractional rig, which means this right here, your forestay, or my roller furling in this case, does not go all the way up to the top of the mast. As you can see, it goes right here, not up here. So this is called a fractional sloop. This is the type of boat. A regular sloop would be all the way up to the top of the mast, which is what I have, a Pearson 26. So my forestay goes all the way up to the top of the mast, which is a bigger foresail and a smaller main. These boats, more racing boats that have fractional rig like this one, have smaller jibs and larger mains. You can see our mainsail right here along the boom. The reason why this piece of equipment right here is called the boom is because if you're not paying attention, that thing will swing across the boat and hit you in the head and knock you out. That's why it's called the boom. Moving along. Of course, there's all your outer stays and your inner shrouds. Holding the mast up, this is all rigged down to the deck. On every boat, there's usually an inner and an outer. This is your inner. You see these cables, and this is your outer over here. This has got runners, so it's got 2 backstays. As you can see, there's one backstay. This backstay goes to the starboard side, and then wherever your foresail attaches to, in this case I got roller furling, so the sail's rolled around the forestay right here. And all those cables hold the mast up. They pull it down basically onto the deck if this is a deck step mast. If not, this mast goes all the way down through the cabin. But either or, this holds it up. I like to heel the boat over right now. But anyway, your rudders are back here. There's a big keel under here that helps with righting moment. It has all the weight in the keel, basically a big fin down here. And the other thing with the keel, the reason why it's a big fin is if you had your sails up, and think about this scientifically, and you're sailing along, without that fin, the wind would just be blowing you sideways. So that fin on the keel, basically, it helps generate that sideways force into forward momentum. So that's how sailboats are able to sail forward instead of going sideways with the wind blowing on them. The other thing, let's do this. I brought this up earlier. Oh god. Points of sail. This is something you really need to study. Just type in points of sail on Google Images and you can bring up a similar image like this. And especially if you're new to sailing, you really need to understand this and study this. So issue your wind direction. Obviously you cannot sail directly into the wind. This is called the dead area, or I call it the graveyard essentially. The iron graveyard. Now we're inventing shit. Anyway, and then you can kind of see how the sails are trimmed as it bears away from the wind on both sides. And yeah, you can use this for reference for the first few years of sailing, you know, whatever you do. I didn't really do this because I started sailing when I was about 3 or 4 years old and started competitively racing when I was about 7, so I just kind of learned things and went with it. But if you're older and you're looking at books or something, pretty much every sailing book's going to have this diagram in there. And it's worth really looking into and studying the position of the sails. You know, obviously, close haul, this is as closest to the wind as you can get, and this is called tacking. You would, if you're trying to reach a mark out here or a destination out here where the wind's coming from, you'd be zigzagging like this, tacking back and forth. That's what we call it, tacking. But if you're sideways with the wind, that's called reaching. Either way, And then you got broad reaching and running, which is running away from the wind, pretty much, as you can see. A little bit more complicated with the sail trim there. If you don't have a spinnaker, you're going to do something called wing on wing, which is putting the foresail out to one side and the mainsail out to the other, and that differs depending on what side the wind is coming from. So you definitely need to study up on that and become familiar with that, because when you're out sailing on a boat, you have to decide, you have to be able to know by looking around you which way the wind's coming from at all times. And once you're able to recognize that, you have to be able to make a split decision on where you want your sails trimmed. And especially when you're racing, you got to do this stuff, on the fly within seconds. We have tailtails and cassette tape wire, or whatever you want to, hanging off of certain parts on the boat that really tell us wind direction, and that you can look up and look at that and be like, okay, I need the sails over this way, or so forth. So without wasting too much more time, let's get some sails up. Main halyard. I'm going to try and make you guys familiar with some control lines on the boat as well in this beginner's video, because you need to know this stuff. Halyards in sailing terms is anything that raises the sails up. So as you can see, main halyard, this is my main sail. If I pull this, the sail starts coming up. We'll bring that all the way up to 100%. Now we are directly pointed into the wind, as you can kind of see on this diagram right here. This line is where the wind's coming from, and this is where my boat is. So we're going to go ahead and turn away from the wind. And you hear the flapping went away. So we'll fall off a little bit here, just right about there. It's fine. Sheets. So we want to find our main sheet. That's what. Where are we? Main sheet. I don't need to be 100% in. Right about there is about fine. Your main sheet is this line right here. This controls the tightness of the entire mainsail as far as the center of the boat, or you can lid it all the way out. Let me lid it all the way out for you, so you can kind of see what happens. See how I'm lidding it out? It's flapping again because it's pretty much at this angle, which is right into the wind again. So if I tighten that main sheet up, you'll see it fill with some power again, and let it back out here. You're going to be familiar with these. You got to get yourself familiar with these if you're a beginning sailor. These little flapping lines right here are all telltales. This is how we are able to tell how the flow over the sail is. There's some in the front and there's some on the other side. Maybe if I go over here I can kind of see the other side. Yeah. If the sail is trimmed perfectly right, these will be flying straight back. That's all you really need to know about telltales. Get out there, play around with them. Let your sails in and out, try different courses until you get familiar with these things, and if they're flying straight back, you're on the right. Let me pull that in a little bit. The wind shifted on us. There we go. And it's constantly changing. I mean, the wind is never in the same direction all day. It's always moving around and oscillating on you, so you got to really kind of... Some people I've met, they do the wrong approach to sailing, and they have all these gauges on board, like knot meters and speedometers, or a speedometer or a compass, and they're constantly they're steering the boat like this. They're looking down. They're looking at their knot meter, they're looking at their compass, and you cannot sail a boat that way. You have to sail a boat by looking up here on your horizon, and also at your telltales, on the foresail mostly, and also on your mainsail. Like my mainsail, I also have telltales flying off the back trailing edge, which tell me as long how the flow is going across the whole sail itself. So that's something you really need to become familiar with too, and I'll probably get into... We're going to get into more of that in the advanced sail trim video, which is going to be part 2. Tighten up a little bit more. That wind really clocked over. Fall off a little bit too. This true wind angle right here, 52 degrees. The most you can really point, especially in this boat when I'm fully trimmed in, is about 45 degrees, so you don't want to go any lower than 45 degrees. Let's see here. Kind of heading towards land. I don't want to head too far over here. Alright, for some more, you've probably seen these things, winches on sailboats, and you're probably wondering what the hell they're for. These are what we wrap the lines around, and they basically take all the weight, the pressure, hundreds of pounds of air pressure on a sail, and you got to pull it in. You can't do that by yourself. You got to have something to help you, and that's what these do. Once you wrap a line around these a few times, makes it easier to pull, and especially self-tailing ones like you have here. Your line pretty much clips in and holds itself, and all you gotta do is crank it down with a handle or something. It makes life a lot easier, and it also holds your lines for you. Moving along, with the main, before we bring up the foresail, we have something here called a traveler. If I can focus on it here for a second, it's hard moving around. Okay, let me just select it this way. So you see, watch what happens when I do this. Traveler. See how that went down? This is coming up now, all the way up, down, up. So that's what the traveler does. Is it's another control point for our main. As you can see, I'm letting it out. It pretty much does the same thing that the main sheet does, and if I tighten it up, it really tightens up everything. But for right now, I'm just going to leave that about halfway and control everything with the main sheet. Dump that off a little bit. There we go. What else? Moving up here, this is some stuff I'm only going to get into on the advanced sail trim video. Like number 4 sheet. Number 4 is just a small foresail that you would use in like a stormy conditions. Basically, your number 1 sail is the largest and most powerful sail that you can have up here, and then you have like a number 2 and a number 3. This boat has a number 4. My boat in real life only goes to number 3, so you have like a 155, 130, and then 100% jib. As you can see, jib halyard. Again, this is a halyard, so it raises that foresail. And we got a couple other sails here. We have a code 0, which I'll get into, and a Jenniker, which is it's a spinnaker, asymmetrical spinnaker for downwind sailing. But because we have a bowsprit, it's called a Jenniker because it clips on here and then gets sheeted on the other side. It does not require a spinnaker pull like I have on my boat, which we'll get into more of that kind of stuff in part 2. This is just the basics here. None of this stuff I'm really going to get into on this video either. This is going to be part 2 stuff because this is all sail trim, your outhaul, Cunninghams, reefing. Reefing isn't really advanced. Reefing is, I'll show you what reefing does here actually. Let me select that. So we'll go ahead and reef. There's 3 different points, but I'm going to go ahead and reef all the way just to kind of show you what happens here. So we're reefed all the way. That's a main reef. Now look what happened. See how the mainsail is smaller now and most of it's folded up along the boom here. Now if I release that, let me go back here. Main reef. As you can see, it starts going back up the mast. Reefing is just for lessening the amount of sail area you have up. So if the wind starts really increasing and you have too much sail area up, obviously the boat's going to be overpowered, and it's not very good. Let me trim back in here. There we go. Pretty cool logo I got on the mainsail there. So I'm going to go ahead and unfurl the jib now. Get the jib out here, and we can start dancing around, so to speak. Jesus. Really don't like that. You're trying to sheet in one thing and it highlights another thing. Alright, so that jib's coming out pretty slowly, but it's coming out. Where is my furler? Alright. And as you can see, we got the same thing on the jib as we have on the main. Tailtails. And same thing, you want these both flying straight back, so we're going to go to our jib sheet and just kind of tighten that in until they're flying back towards us a little bit. And that means we're trimmed in pretty well for this angle of sail at 68 true wind angle. So we're going to fall back here to our stern. So now we're really moving with both sails up, and kind of see where I'm at here with the land real quick. So I don't want to run into the land of Sydney Harbor. Oh, we could tack. Yeah, that's beautiful. We could tack out this way. So like I said, tacking is when you turn through the wind as we're doing right now, you're turning through the wind. So right now I'm right into the wind direction. And I'm turning through that wind direction and coming out the other side. That's what tacking is. Which is the only way you can get from point A to point B if you have to go at the wind. Jib sheet, tighten that in a little bit more, and as well as our main sheet. There we go. Like I said, don't worry about sail trim at the moment. We're going to go over that in the part 2, which is the advanced sail trim video I'm going to make here. So if we go to info, this gives you all your boat heel. This is something. Heel is the angle the boat is tipped over, essentially. So we're at 27 degrees of heel. So if you got a protractor, put it at 27 degrees. It would look something like this on your horizon, basically. Sideways drift, we don't have any, which I'm surprised. Usually you have a little bit of sideways drift in a boat. We'll get into that later too. But yeah, with heeling, that's where most people get scared in sailing, is they feel the boat tipping over or heeling over, and they think, oh my god, we're going to die. And that's when experienced sailors on board just kind of laugh at their newbies that they have on, the rookies they have on board. And we're used to being over at angles like this where the wall becomes your new floor. So it's funny when you bring new people sailing and they start freaking out because they can, if you're sitting on the low side, you can put your hand in the water or whatever. So yeah, kind of moving around the boat. See, everything's still trimmed in pretty well. All our tails are moving. Well, our jib isn't. There we go. Tails are moving straight back. So like our jib sheet essentially was this green one right here. Wrap it around this winch, trim it in. Tighten it or loosen it. What else can we do over in the basics here? I don't want to get too in depth with sail trim because that's what part 2 is going to be about. Is sail curvature and everything like that, and being able to control that, and how you adjust the curve on a sail. Essentially, these sails on a sailboat are. Let me get up here. You can kind of see the twist in the main. You want twist in the main, basically. Which, if I can get a better camera angle here, I can kind of see it a little bit. You see how the sail's a little bit flatter here, and then it lifts off when it gets up to the top part of the sail, where it really kind of twists off like this. That generates a lot of power. You want more twists, more curve to the sails in lighter winds, and when the strong winds come, you want to tighten everything up and flatten everything out. And that's what all those control lines give you, the power of getting more. You can see it on the jib here too, if we take a look at that. See how this has got a lot of twist and a lot of belly curve to it. That gives you a lot of power in light wind, and when you get some strong winds, you really want to have less belly and a lot straighter, flatter of a sail in order to reduce the power on the boat. And that's what we'll get into in part 2, is all the control lines for that. But you can kind of see, yeah, we're about 30 degrees of heel, like that thing was indicating, so pretty cool. Alright, so that's upwind sailing for you. We'll go ahead and tack again here. So you're coming through the wind and coming out the other side just like this. Keep turning until your sails fill up again, and beautiful. And now we're going to turn completely away from the wind. So my wind direction is from over here right now. We're going to turn all the way onto a reach. And the reason I want to do that is I want to bring up a different type of sail. So I'm going to dump my, like you were saying, when you look at this, we're going from this right now to about this. So we need to lift the sails out. We don't need them as tight. So let's fall off, and where is my main sheet? You can see when I had that main sheet tight and we fell off the wind, you see how these tails are dropped now? They're kind of just hanging around. that means your sail is stalled. It's too tight for the wind angle, so you're not generating any power off of that right now. If I let that out, you can see how these telltales start flying again. And we let that out too far and the telltales drop out or start flying up. On the jib, it's a little different. If your telltales are flying up, you're stalling the jib. If they're hanging down, you're not trimmed in right either. Let's see where the hell is my jib sheet. Gotta let that out as well. And we're gonna actually get rid of that sail because we're on a reach. So we're gonna go back to our jib furl. Just gonna roll that up. That's what the furler does. Gets rid of our foresail, rolls that up for us. And our code 0, we have a code 0 on this boat, which is a reaching sail. Gonna go ahead and bring that up with our code 0 halyard. And then we'll look for the code 0 sheet, which tightens that sail up. And this is a big sail. This is kind of like the 155 jib on my boat. It's a very big foresail. Gives you a lot of power for reaching or sailing just off the wind. You can see how powered up the boat is right now. Everything looks really beautiful. And a lot of mainsail twist. Here's that twist I'm talking about. You see how flat it is down here, and then it just lifts off on its way up the mast. See how this twist is right here? Look at that. That's what you want. Light winds. We're only got 11 knots of wind right now, so that's pretty much, I want this amount of twist. You know, everything looks good right now. We're pretty powered up. The other thing we can do is sail. I'm going to drop the code 0, so we're not going to be on a beam reach anymore. We're going to fall off and go on pretty much a broad reach, somewhere between a broad reach and a run, and we're going to pull up our downwind sail. So we'll go ahead and drop this code 0 halyard. Say goodbye to that. And while we're doing that, we're going to fall off, so you can see our true wind angle right here. We're going to fall off right about here. So now we're downwind. And as you can see, our main isn't really doing anything anymore, so we gotta let the main sheet. What do we gotta do? We gotta lay it out, or we gotta pull it in? If you said lay it out, you're right. So we'll lay it out right about there, which is pretty far, because our wind direction right now is coming from here, right behind us. And then our Jenniker, which is our downwind sail, we'll go ahead and pull that up, and we're gonna be really powered up once we pull this baby up. And there you go. Off to the races again. With that sail up, you do, with that or a spinnaker, you don't, where's my main? You gotta pull your main sheet in a little bit more than you normally would if you're just running wing on wing. I'm not gonna do wing on wing right now, but anyway. Take a look outside. Look at that. Very nice. Alright, with the Jenniker or spinnaker, I'm going to get up here so we can really watch this. You usually have somebody on your crew trim this, and we're way too tight on that sail right now, so I'm going to lay it off. Alright, so it's flopping all over the place right now. We don't have it trimmed in tight enough in order to generate all the power. It's pretty much just flapping in the wind, so what do we got to do? We got to tighten that up until it starts, until it stops flapping. So right about there, you can see that's what this leading edge is for. You watch this blue tape right here, and we'll lay it off a little bit more. Oops, wrong sail. I don't know why it selects the main sheet for me. Jenniker sheet, there we go. So I'm letting it off. You see it start flapping again, this blue line right here. Go ahead and tighten that up until it just stops. And that's how you control a downwind sail like a Jenniker or a spinnaker, is you really want this sail to breathe. So usually you got one person steering the boat, you got one person controlling the main trim, and you'd have another person playing that line, your Jenniker sheet in this case, letting this sail breathe. You let it out a little bit until it starts flapping, you'd pull it back in until it stops flapping, and that's how you can generate the most power out of these type of sails. These sails are very strong, they're made out of nylon, but they're really, really light and very thin, so they're pretty much like throwing up paper mache or that's not the type of material I'm thinking of. What am I thinking of? You know, like the when you buy somebody a present and you put it in like a gift bag, that stuffing paper that goes in there, that's the type of material. That's what this sail feels like essentially. It's very crispy and very, very light compared to all the other sails on board. But it's very delicate as far as trim is concerned, and that's all you're doing when you're sailing. Is you're out, you find out where the wind's coming from, and you set your sails. Again, if you're a beginner, reference this thing and watch your telltales. Start to study your telltales and what happens when you do certain things to the boat, and eventually you'll become a master. You'll be able to oops, I ran aground. Doesn't seem like I should run aground out this far. Yeah, like we're pretty far off on land. But that's one of the problems with this game, is there's still a lot of bugs. As far as places that aren't mapped out the right way as far as elevations and water depth, so they're still working on that. Let me fall back off here. Turn that sheet back up. There we go, back on our way. So yeah, anyway, where were we? Yeah, and also if you're a beginner, I recommend getting this game. Like I said, it's only 40 bucks. It's called Sailaway. It's on Steam, and you can learn a lot. You can get on here and just play around with some boats and learn a lot about sailing. And there's also tons of people online that will help you with anything you need. And there's also a very healthy racing community. And so if you want to get into competitive racing, you can start learning about that. Like I said, part 2 is going to be advanced sail trim, which we'll get into if you stay tuned to that video. And then part 3 is going to be racing tactics and how you basically race a sailboat and all that kind of stuff. Whatever I know, I'll transfer my knowledge over to you guys. The other thing you want to know about downwind sailing, I forgot to go over this. Just like sailing into the wind, you do something called tacking, which is going back and forth like this in a zigzag pattern. There's also something called jibing, which is when you're sailing away from the wind, you zigzag the opposite direction, which I'll show you right now. So you can kind of see the wind direction is right about here. And if I turn, it's directly behind us, and now it's coming out the other side. And you see how the sails flipped over? That's why that's called the boom. If someone was standing right here with their head up, let's do that again, I'll show you, and they got hit by this thing, they'd be knocked overboard or knocked unconscious. That's why you always, when you're out on somebody's boat, you keep clear of this thing. You keep your eye on that at all times, peripheral vision, whatever you want to use. Because if you're standing up and that thing hits you, you're gone. So I'll get up here and just sail for a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and drop the Jenniker now. I don't need that. And while we're just sailing on the main alone here, I'll go over a few more things, I think, with the basics. See, we slowed right down without that foresail up. Oh, what else do I got to go over? Try to make sure I don't miss anything, really. Yeah, in this game, your HTG is your heading, COG is course over ground, speed over ground. This is your speed. The reason why speed over ground and speed is sometimes different is because there's a little paddle wheel underneath the boat that spins with the water passing over it, and that's what gives you a readout on your knot meter, so our speed. Speed over ground is generated from a GPS, and it's a little bit more accurate because when you have a current, it's either pushing you or it's working against you. It's pushing you backwards. So say I was sailing into a current right now, and maybe there's a 1 knot current pushing against me. My speed would say 3, for example, and my speed over ground would be 2 because it's slowing us down by that 1 knot. And that's something that the paddle wheel on the bottom of the boats don't pick up. And so it's more accurate to have a GPS on board and go by speed over ground than it is to actually go by speed. Speed's more of just a reference point to kind of, oh, are we sailed in good enough, or trimmed in good enough? You know, we can trim things a little bit more, and you can kind of see your speed increase or whatever. I've been on a boat racing at one point in time where we got heeled over so far that that paddle wheel actually came out of the water. and the speed was reading 0 for the longest, so that was pretty funny. Moving on, this true wind angle and apparent wind angle. The reason why this differs, if I come forward here, we're going to turn around a little bit here. Your true wind angle is where the wind truly is coming from, and your apparent wind angle is, let me tighten this in real quick, main sheet. As you can see, the apparent wind angle is shifting forward a little bit. That's from the forward momentum of the boat. So we're moving forward at about 4 knots right now. And that's why the apparent wind angle goes over this way, because that's taking that true wind angle, but now you're moving into that at a forward pace. I wish I could explain it a little bit better, but it's essentially what happens when the wind's from over here, but you're moving into it, so really it's over here. It's, yeah. If you don't understand that, I'll try to explain it more in the advanced video. And that also gives you a different true wind speed and apparent wind speed. Apparent wind speed when you're heading into it is going to be higher than your true wind speed because you're sailing into it. So because we're moving at 4 knots into 11 knot breeze, it's going to be a little bit higher, and that's why our apparent wind reads 14.3 when our true is 11.8. What else can I go over here? GPS, hopefully you know something about GPS, your positioning and everything, if you're going to be on a sailboat and navigating. Yeah, things like your backstays and everything I'm going to go over in advanced sail trim, because if you're just going out to sail with your family, you don't really need to worry about backstays or anything like that. You just throw some cloth up and get out there, move around, you know. But I think that just about does it for the beginners video. Stay tuned for the advanced sailing sail trim video that's coming up. I'm going to probably record that in the next few minutes here. So hopefully you learned something. We're going to be starting some more races, and I'm going to be making YouTube videos of those races again within the next week, so look forward to that. And yeah, anyway, stay tuned for part 2, part 3. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something. We'll see you next time.